All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning in to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So I want to name this podcast is Enjoy Your Life When You're Young. I know you may be thinking, yeah, no shit. But I'm going to tell you something that I've seen over the years more than anything is people don't take advantage of all their freedom when they're younger, or they don't go out to, I guess you could say, explore. The world is so massive. And, I did a podcast with my girlfriend not long ago regarding something similar to this. And it was, so I moved to Florida when I was younger. I was actually coming here really young. I mean, basically coming to Florida, let's just say from 5 years old on. But I moved here officially at 18, but I used to do summer school in the summers throughout my high school years because my dad moved here. I also had family in California, so we were able to go there as well. But I talk about a lot of my friends and people I know, they end up coming to retire. They move to Florida in their, could be late 60s, most of them, mid 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then when they get here, they're miserable because the one thing they realized was, why did they not come a lot earlier? Not everyone, but a lot of people don't realize having beautiful weather year round, how amazing that is. And a lot of my family members, friends, colleagues, they're in the Midwest. Some are actually even in Canada. And they would, like a lot of people, they would, they'd get married from where they were from, stay there. Then their kids would get married, so they'd stay there and freeze their ass off or whatever the case may be. And never really had the balls to move. And I think nowadays more than ever, you have opportunities to move and do certain things. But back to, my point was when you're younger, if you have the desire to do things, don't hold back. Do them. It may not be easy at first. One was even when I moved to another state. I was the only one out of like 150 cousins I had to actually move out of Chicago. It was like I betrayed my own city, my own town, all my friends, family members, right? It was kind of like that. It reminded me of like maybe my grandfathers when they left Italy. Well, they left to prosper. And I guess I was leaving to prosper to work with my father. But there is a betrayal component to it, I felt like. And now I have tons of family members that live in Florida, live in Arizona. They live all over the place, And it's quite interesting. The ones that all did move, they're like, thank God I moved out of, Chicago, hypothetically, just because of the weather. And a lot of other things. They complain about taxes and things in that nature, traffic, whatever. But you got to have that in you. If you living in Florida is so different. Some people will never leave Chicago, and I get that as well. They just like doing their vacation in warm weather, or that's where they're from. They love the food, the lifestyle, the culture, the people. I get it. But if you're somebody who's young, the first thing I would say is learn to explore and try different things. And I didn't realize when I was younger I was actually doing all these things, even though I was kind of set in my ways. But now that I look back, I saw my friends were really set in their ways. I was actually like a gypsy compared to them. Because when I was younger, we started to gamble, me and my buddy, and we made a lot of money when we were young. In our early 20s, we were fortunate. And I know a lot of people can't afford to travel or do certain things. I get it. And there are ways of working around that, especially now. It's so much easier to travel affordably than it's ever been. You just have to be smart. I do videos on that as well, even on my YouTube page. But there are ways to learn how to travel, not just backpacking it like the old days and shit and staying in those hostels or any of that shit. I never did any of that. You don't have to do that. But when I was younger, we started to gamble a lot. So we were bouncing between casinos actually throughout North America. I shouldn't say North America. I should just say United States. I wasn't going into Canada at that point in time. But we'd be in Florida, and then we would even in Illinois, we'd go to Peoria or Joliet. But even if we weren't there, we were going to California to gamble. We were going to Jersey. We were going to even places like Compton, which sounds crazy. We were gambling legally and illegally. Vegas, I even had my honeymoon in Vegas. But, by the time I was like 25 and getting married, I kind of went everywhere I wanted to go, let's just say. I never went to Italy at that point in time because I always felt like I probably should live there to a certain degree, at least because I felt like even though Florida, my grandparents used to say I was born in the wrong country because of the food I loved and the way, the lifestyle and the way I wanted to dress and everything, which was quite funny to me. They're like, you should go back to Italy. Because I used to have a lot of problems with like just the way the United States, the way they set certain things up, even the schooling systems. I had all these different type of issues. But when I was younger, like I said, I was fortunate enough to go to all those places. And what's really crazy is now fast forward to my 40s to 50s, I basically blanketed North America. I still am, constantly. And I've been everywhere, I think with the exception of maybe Montana. But I've been to numerous places. So just in the next week, well, last week I was in Vegas, just in the last 2 weeks, let's say I hit Manhattan, I hit Boston downtown, and then I was in Vegas, and then I was in San Diego, and then I was in San Francisco, and I'm actually heading to the Bahamas and then Puerto Rico, and then next is back to New York, and then I think I got to go to Edmonton, Canada, and then I was at Calgary twice. I don't say this to, whatever, but these are all experiences. But if you're younger, I'm not saying you have to be that extreme. If you have the desire to try different things, go do it. Don't let people stop you. Just make sure you're protected and you know what you're doing. Don't put yourself in a bad spot. Don't stay in bad neighborhoods or that type of thing. And, obviously make sure you're old enough to do a lot of things. I'd recommend I wouldn't even say 18, if you're going to do the United States. If you go to Europe and do all that, God bless you. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. I would just make sure you're protected or you know how to protect yourself. And I'm not kidding you, if you're going to start traveling, I would definitely tell someone to learn self-defense of some type. I don't care if you learn how to box a little. I don't care if you learn how to do jiu-jitsu. If you're going to travel, you're going to run into problems. Okay, especially in Europe and things of that nature. People are going to try to rob you, possibly. You may get in fights. Things may go down, and I just want to make sure you know that. And women, here's the deal. Same thing, protect yourself. Sometimes, though, I would say, especially like, I'll just say Europe or Italy or whatever, if, I don't care sometimes if there's one or two girls together or even three a group. Sometimes you're going to find yourself in a very bad position. You do not want to do that. You want to definitely make sure the area you're going in is safe. But here's the thing. At night, things change. That goes for anywhere in the world. So a lot of people think it's a safe, great place to visit. At night, the environment changes. I mean, we even see that in Naples. That's our family's from Naples and all that. And you can just tell the environment in certain towns changes very quickly. We even had our altercations with a lot of Italians just because some of their behavior wasn't jiving with me. And I'm kind of very outspoken and I don't mess around. And I had my uncles, I had to protect them. They're older. And I had to make sure everybody kept their distance, especially in certain nights. We hit a lot of Naples. We hit a lot of different areas. So I'll put that aside. Back to being younger and enjoy yourself. I was just talking to my girlfriend about this, that I think they went to Norway, but she's a Navy brat, and her family used to live overseas. They're originally from the Philippines. And her younger sisters, I think, her middle sister traveled around a lot, and then her younger sister was actually lived in another country for a while, and my girlfriend's blanketed North America as well for the most part. She's incredible at traveling. I don't know much better as far as just getting shit done, knowing exactly where to go, getting the right flights, transportation, everything. She's great at all that. And she was the one really we were both actually discussing, like how maybe when she was younger, even though she did do some traveling with her dad and she lived in a lot of different places being a Navy brat, there were things like Paris, for instance, she's never been to. I don't think she's been to Italy. She's been to the Philippines a bunch of times, and a lot of other places. But the thing was, a lot of places she never got to go to, and she passed that up when she was younger, and she probably could have done it, she said. And I was never, the two places I always wanted to go to was Hawaii, which I never did until recently, a few months ago, Maui specifically, which I was able to do, and I wanted to do Italy. So those were the two that I never did at a young age, and I was able to do them. But what's quite interesting is I was basically almost 50 years old by the time I did that. I didn't have to wait that long to do that. And if you, again, are younger, and if you're single or even if you're not married or you don't have kids, go out and do shit. Do the shit you want to do, even if it's locally again. I'm talking extremes with traveling, but I can even tell a lot of people, even from Chicago, let's say, Because even when I was younger, we'd go on these road trips and stuff. And in Chicago, I'd hate to say it, the Midwest, there's not a lot of place to go that I had any desire going to. You know, you're surrounded, nothing against Indiana, Iowa, you know, Wisconsin, Ohio, just the Midwest. You got North Dakota, South Dakota, you know, all these different places you could go to. And I was basically just going to California, or I was driving to, you know, Tennessee. I was going in and out of Florida, so I'd always hit Tennessee and Georgia. Obviously, we would hit those in Indiana. And those were the main ones we were always going through. But then I realized when I went to New York, like how much shit there's to do just surrounding New York, which obviously include Boston. And you have D.C., you got Philly, you got even Buffalo. You could go straight up to Toronto. I'm not going to sit there and start like all of a sudden getting crazy with geography. But my point is, it was so amazing to see how people on the East Coast, how many different things in major cities they can go to. Rhode Island. The first time I went to New York, a long time ago, I ended up having to visit 105 locations in 28 days. I know that sounds crazy. So I blanketed the East Coast. So I learned, I didn't learn, but I got to see the entire, basically, East Coast. I was even jumping on boats with my car, or whatever you want to call them, not boats, whatever, big yachts, whatever the hell, and they transported me because the drives were too long. So it was an amazing, and it was in January, which kind of sucked, but it was cold, but it was crazy. And again, if you're younger, if you live in the East Coast, I don't care if you live in the Midwest, the West Coast, not only are there places, so when I lived in San Diego or California, you know, you got Vegas, obviously, you got Phoenix, you got Arizona, you know, there's so many other cool places you could go to throughout California, just up and down it. The same with Florida. Florida's a beast. People don't realize up and down, there's so many different beach towns, so many things to do. If you're in Canada, which it's a little more spread out, but holy shit, even if you go to Vancouver, it's gorgeous, right? You could go there. You could go to Banff, for instance. You could go to Victoria. Wait, did I say Banff? I'm sorry, I meant Whistler. But even if you go to certain places like Calgary, you could go to Banff. You just got to drive. Toronto, up in that area. There's so many, Montreal. There's a lot of things to do. It's gorgeous. And if you're younger, man, if you're in those areas, and I'm just talking about North America for the most part, I'm not even going to get into Italy. That's amazing. You know, I went pretty high up all the way down to basically Sorrento, so I've got to see a lot of Italy. But if you have the opportunities, go. Don't blow it off. I promise you, you're going to regret it. And don't think you're going to always have time to do these things, even with family members. One thing I do regret, my dad used to go to Jamaica all the time. He invited me all the time. I never went with him. I don't know why. I didn't have it. I just wasn't interested. And I know a lady who, her mother's Chinese. They lived in Chinatown, New York. And she's older. I don't even know if her mom's alive or not. She kept blowing off going to China with her mother. Then her mother got sick. And then they were never able to go do it. And I think her mom passed. And she says that's the one thing she can't believe she blew off for most of her life when she had the opportunity, was to go back home, or her mother's home, to do that with her. And I think regardless if your parents want to do things or friends or colleagues, you got to look at it yourself. If you have certain opportunities, take the time to do it. Even when I was going to Italy, I was kind of hand and hawing, like, well, if I go there, I mean, it's a 2-week vacation. I got to, I got to update my passport again. I got to do that. Then I said, what kind of asshole are you talking about? And then they said, my cousin surprised me and said, our uncles are going. He says, who do you want to take if you ever want to take anybody? I told him my uncles. He's like, then that's done. We're gone. I was like, holy shit. Let me get some water. Thank God I didn't blow that off. I mean, am I crazy? The one place I always really wanted to go in my life was Italy, but it was almost like I was afraid to do it. You may go through that too. Sometimes things you really desire that you want to do, especially traveling-wise, I sometimes, for some reason, and I found myself doing this, setting myself up to not do it for some reason. Like maybe it's just something, it's either I want to just always look forward to doing that, maybe in the future. But I'm here to tell you, a lot of times it may never come to be. I see so many people that had desire to go do things, especially regarding traveling or anything in life, that didn't do it. My father, who used to travel a lot, never did the East Coast, and he never did Italy. He never even seen the town his parents come from, and he always talks about that. Now he's at the point, I don't think he can do that trip physically. Maybe, but maybe not. And it doesn't seem like he wants to, but he kind of gave up on it. But he never even seen New York, Boston. He went to D.C. That's about as far as he went. But he never did any of those type of places. I don't think he's ever been to Canada. He's never been just to Europe in general, which is crazy because he's almost, talk about a guy who looks and acts European. And now I think he does regret that. So regardless, if you have opportunities to travel, and you're going to have kids, travel with them too. I know a lot of people are like, oh, that sucks. It sucks to travel with kids, and I get it. When they're too young, I will say it sucks. And I see so many people living in Orlando, Florida throughout the years bringing 1, 2, 3-year-olds that are miserable. They're in the heat. They make them go to 4 or 5 parks in a week. They burn their kids out. Don't do that shit. But on the flip side, I always took my kids when they were old enough, especially, even when they were younger, I should say. But when even 5, 6, 7, you start taking them to places, let them really see what the world's about. Okay, it's one thing to read about it, watch videos on it, but it's another to live it. I tell all my friends, even with their kids that are in, grade school, middle school, high school, I go, I wish I could take all your kids with me everywhere I go. Because the culture, nothing is like really going to places and you get to stay where they stay. You get to listen to the language. You get to see the foods they eat. You get to see the artwork. It's like you're living it. I always said a lot of times when I'm traveling to all these different places, it's like a movie that I'm going into. Like all of a sudden, you see different movies all the time, right? And they're all about different places all over the world. But let's just use for North America, for instance, like there's movies with people in Toronto. There's, in wherever, California, obviously, New York, or all different places, Chicago. It's one thing to watch a movie, but when you fly to these places and actually start doing the things that you've seen in the movies, or you just almost feel like you're in a movie. You're like, now you're experiencing it. You're not just watching it. And I felt like that in Italy. Holy shit. When I was in Venice and it was Carnival, I was like, oh my God. Like, I feel like it's the 1700s because everybody, the way they were dressed and the environment and the food. And then, even Naples or, we went to a lot of different towns, Milan. But it was like, I've seen so many movies in Italy, or I've read so much about it and watched so many videos. I wasn't just a spectator. I was like involved. I was a part of it. It became a part of me and it changed me. And if you're going to travel a lot, I don't think people realize how much you just going to certain places will change your perspective on life and how you think, good and bad. That's the thing which is kind of amazing. A lot of people only take vacations, I think, a lot of times, and they only go to kind of foo-foo places or bullshitty. It would be even like when I was talking about going to Hawaii. So we're in Hawaii, and I loved Maui to death. We went there first. I should have just stayed there. And then we went to Honolulu. Not saying Honolulu's bad. We went off the grid to do a lot of things, which I loved. But I loved Maui so much, but when I got to Honolulu, it was like, oh my God, this is touristy. It almost reminds me of South Florida and blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of being a bitch. And I'm like, let's go off the grid. So we went to Pearl Harbor, beautiful, amazing. And then we started to go hit water fountains. And then we hit the mountain. I forget what the hell is it called. I did videos on all these places. I got one of the best massages I ever got. I just said I'm going totally off the grid in Honolulu to all the places. They're kind of touristy. I mixed in touristy with no touristy, and all the food I wanted to eat, except a couple times. I'm like, I just want to go to all the best local spots, nowhere near the tourists. So we did our research, and it was awesome. So those are just experiences that I went through, and I thought maybe I could just share like some of what I've been through in my life. But if you're definitely younger, because you have the energy, and a lot of people, especially you think you're going to be healthy when you're 50, 60, 70, that may not always be the case. You also... If you have, it's not only, if you have the money, go do. If you have the time, go do it. And a lot of times it's just getting over the hump saying, man, I got to take a long flight, or man, I got to drive how far? Now that I have traveled so much, I've caught thousands of flights in the last 10 years. Once you kind of get used to it, it's an adventure. You just get used to it. And people complain about a flight, and I get it gets a little long, but if you look at it, all you basically do is go sit down, then somebody takes you somewhere, you get off, and you're there. It's amazing if you look at it from that perspective. Even if you got to get in your car and drive 5 hours or somewhere like that, which is a joke for me. Think about it. You just get into something. It's air conditioning, most likely heated. Listen to the radio now or do whatever you want, podcast, whatever. And then you're somewhere different in 5 years to experience something entirely different that you never experienced before. I mean, I think we just take a lot of that for granted. I know I did for years. But if you have that drive or you want to try different things, please try it. I'm telling you right now. So I'm going to wrap it up there. You might want to check out my YouTube channel because I do videos on all different places that I go to all over North America, which include gyms, my favorite restaurants, towns, malls, coffee houses, gym tours, whatever, if you like that stuff. And I give you an idea what it looks like. So you may want to check that out. I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And please, leave a comment. And if you really have the desire to move somewhere or go vacation or whatever, go do it. And here's the last thing I'm going to wrap up with. If you have a desire to move somewhere, I tell people all the time, make sure you go there at the worst time of year, especially if it's cold. But because a lot of people, I don't think, realize, especially if they originally from warm climates like, say, Florida, Arizona, California, Vegas, whatever, and then they all of a sudden want to move to New York, Chicago, Philly, and I get it, maybe for the job. Make sure you understand what you're getting involved in, okay? And on the flip side, too, a lot of people that lived in big cities like Philly, New York, Chicago, LA, whatever, and if they go to somewhere where it's kind of a slower type town, make sure you go stay there before you commit for a while, because the boredom on the flip side, if you're used to action, great food, the theater, whatever the case may be, the city life, I guess you could say, and then you go to is that a rural town? Is that what they call that? Like just a slow town, a sleepy town. It's going to be a culture shock. Some people love it to get away. Some people just are absolutely miserable. So I met so many people throughout the world. I don't think a lot of them realize that, especially when going to college, young people. There's a lot of people I know that have, they want to come to Chicago for college, or they want to go to New York or this or that, and then they go and they only last a year or a short amount of time because they didn't realize the weather conditions, how brutal it is. And it's not that you can't live through it, obviously, but a lot of people make sure where you're going, if you're going to move somewhere, is right for you. So even I tell people in Arizona, that want to move to Arizona, I'm like, go to Arizona in the summer, which is beautiful, and get an idea of exactly how hot it is for a while, even if you take a vacation a couple weeks, and then you might want to wait and then check the winter because it does get cold there. But make sure you enjoy that environment when it's kind of not at its best, I guess you could say, because a lot of people, when they travel, they come to Florida at certain times, you're like, oh, it's always beautiful. Well, no, it's really hot for a long period of time, and then it's beautiful in the winter. But California, people think it's always going to be great weather year-round. It's not always the case, okay, especially in northern California, and that goes for a lot of places. Just make sure you do your research and go test that out, okay? All right, take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.